Hello again everyone, welcome back to another episode of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. My name is Mars, and today we're going to be talking about the Kingdom Hearts banner and whether or not it's worth your investment. Pull on. We're going to talk about Riku, Sora, and Kairi to decide whether or not it's something you should even bother with. So let's jump right into it. Before we start today's video, I want you to look right here. Normally, when you buy Lapis, you can buy 18,000 Lapis for 100 bucks, okay? 18,000 divided by 100 bucks, okay? That is 180 Lapis per dollar, okay? Pay attention if you're wanting to spend money here, okay? With Amazon coins, you can spend $80 and get $100 of value in the Amazon App Store, which means you can buy the same 18,000 Lapis for $80 instead of 100. So that gets you 18,000 divided by $80. That's 225 Lapis per dollar. If we get a Black Friday bundle that's, let's say, has 24,000 Lapis in it, and sometimes they've had more, sometimes they've had less for 100 bucks, okay? We'll just have to see what the bundles look like. If you can get 24,000 Lapis for that same $80 using the Amazon App Store, you are talking about getting 24,000 divided by $80, 300 Lapis per dollar, okay? I don't know about you, but 300 Lapis per dollar being twice as much as you normally get is a little bit insane. So if you want to save money on this game and you want to spend money on this game, this is basically the only way to do it. Use my Amazon link down in the description below to get a deal on your Amazon coins. Use this to save money because literally you're getting almost twice as much Lapis for the exact same amount of money. So please do this. I do this. This is a product I believe in. It's something I'm very passionate about. So again, a thank you to Amazon for sponsoring today's video. Let's get into talking about the Kingdom Hearts units. Alright, so regarding the Kingdom Hearts units, we're going to go ahead and rip off of a band-aid very quickly. Kairi... Yeah, she's not that good. And I'll just tell you, like, me saying she's not that good means a whole bunch of people are going to be spurred into action to, like, use her and, like, say, see, I used her in this content and she was great. It's fine. Kairi's a usable character, but by no means is she a meta character. As far as highlights go, her clothes is a TMR that is, it's not even really best in slot for her. You wouldn't really even use it for her. It's got a mediocre amount of attack and an okay amount of spirit, and then it gives 50% attack and spirit, which is a good total amount. Good for early builds if you're newer to the game, but you will never use it as a best in slot for anything, I don't believe. And it's limited to females, so yeah, not an amazing TMR. Her STMR is a similar vein of weirdness where you're looking at 70% attack and spirit, which will say, oh, that's a lot of spirit. That'll help us, you know, tank bosses. But the reality is you can build around boss damage to the point that they never actually hit your DPS, so you don't really care about spirit anymore. MP recovery, LB fill, and dark resistance. It does give a lot of things in one STMR materia, but you're just not really going to care about it compared to other STMR materias out there for damage dealers or for supports. As far as the vision card itself goes, it's another weird one where it's split between attack and spirit, so it doesn't give you the most attack you could have or the most spirit you could have. It kind of gives you a little bit of both. Same with the percent passives, and then some extra light resistance at the end for whatever reason. Honestly, I think this is one of the least impressive vision cards in the game. It's one that if I got it, I would never use it. I wouldn't use it on a tank or support because there are better spirit cards out there, and I wouldn't ever use it for the attack because almost any card with attack on it is better than this one. So with that said and that out of the way, Kairi doesn't bring a lot in terms of items. As far as her kit is concerned, she kind of toes the line between damage dealer and support. And you can use her as a damage dealer, you can use her as a support. She just doesn't do an excellent job of both. And I think that's kind of her main failing. She's got a lot of useful things like light imbue, light damage buff, and you'll see stuff like that show up in Dark Vision. So if you're a Dark Vision's meta freak, keep in mind she can buff light damage. So there's stuff like that is useful, but in terms of the longevity of the unit, her damage it's not gonna stick around, and her support is inconsistent. So a quick example of how her support can be inconsistent is, and this is true with all of the Kingdom Hearts characters, they have a Brave Shift that's available on turn 1, and it only lasts for 2 turns, and then you have a 2-turn cooldown to return to normal, and then a cooldown to Brave Shift of 1 turn. So you can't actually stay in your shifted form forever, you can only stay there for 2 turns. So if you wanted to use her for a support character, and you wanted to use her for her status ailment resistance buff right here, I mean, you can keep it up full time by swapping between her stances. But if somebody died and you needed to reapply it, or you needed to be more responsive, or you got dispelled, or things like that, it makes it so that she's very inflexible as a support. And then talking about her damage is just not as consistent. Now, the nice thing about her damage is, if I am reading her correctly, I believe most of it comes from her standard form. She does light damage. It's good by today's standards, but I don't think it'll stick around in terms of the meta. So that's kind of an overview of her. She's an absolute mirror of equity chainer. She's a little bit of a support. I'm sure you can build her out to be really chonky in battle, but ultimately I would rather have stronger damage dealers and more flexible and impressive supports. She kind of hits on both, so you can make her work in your parties, but she's not somebody that I care about, and I don't think she, for me and my party comps, I don't see her adding much value. Now, speaking of value, let's go ahead and talk about Riku, because Riku is one of the better characters coming with this collaboration. First of all, his items that he provides, his TMR, his STMR, and his vision card are better, and he as a unit is probably going to be the one that you're going to be able to use the longest, because he has a lot of flexibility in what he can do for your party. So first of all, his TMR is an accessory that gives flat attack and an increase in LB damage. This is really handy. It's basically a slightly stronger version of Esther's TMR. It gives you more attack and more LB damage boost, but it doesn't give you HP as kind of like the trade-off. Ultimately, if I was using an LB damage dealer and I wanted this, I would use this above Esther's TMR. So that's handy. Riku's STMR is really, really nice. This is one that you would actually probably end up using a lot, because it gives you a flat 80% attack, which is a lot for a materia slot, and it also gives you 100% true dual wield and 100% true double hand. So this is something that you could literally use on any character that you have that uses true double hand or true dual wield attack. Really, really flexible. This is an STMR that I think is phenomenal, especially for newer players who don't have all the different varieties of true dual wield or all the varieties of true double hand. Like, this is something that'll give you a ton of value, especially if you're a mid-tier player or somebody who's still working on their item collection. Really, really solid. It won't always or even often be the best in slot option, but it is a really powerful option. So really awesome STMR. I definitely recommend it. His vision card is also quite good. It gives you up to 110 flat attack, which is the highest amount of flat attack that any vision card gives in the game currently. And then it gives you up to 100% attack when equipped with a sword, and it increases your LB damage by 50%. Now keep in mind that this LB damage boost applies only to Kingdom Hearts units, so this is something you could use on Sora if you wanted to, and we'll talk about him in a second. Or you could use it on Riku himself. He has a decently high modifier on his LB. So he's somebody that you could use this on. It is a really solid card overround, especially if you're using sword users. Now, as far as Riku's kit goes, he is kind of like 2B in that he is a breaker and a damage dealer put together. He does primarily dark damage, and he can provide breaks on demand. He can use his base form to provide T-casted 80% breaks, which is good. So you can, leave Vaughn at home if you wanted to, or whoever your breaker is, whether it's, Summer, Fina and Lid, or whoever it is, you can leave them at home and use a dedicated damage dealer slot or a chainer slot and combine breaks with it. Really good there. The other spot that he has breaks is in his shifted form with his LB, or sorry, my bad, it's in his normal form with his LB. Now his normal form LB is a single target full break of 85% for 3 turns, and it reduces dark resistance by 125%. So all in all, if you're supporting a dark party and you need a breaker and a chainer, Riku's really, really good for that. You can shift him and do additional damage with his chains in that form. And he also has a pretty strong limit burst. It has 150 times modifier, which is quite strong. He doesn't have as much LB boosting capacity as Sora or Tifa, for example, so he's not going to be doing as much damage as they are in most situations. That being said, he is also a viable LB damage dealer. So if you want some dark damage and you want some breaks and you want some possibility for LB damage for some burst and things like that, Riku is really going to bring it for you. And I think that you're going to end up seeing Riku stick around the longest, just because combining a breaker with chaining abilities is something that you can make use out of for a long, long time. It's kind of like Lauren, okay? He's most comparable to Neovision Lauren. So if you like Lauren and you like what she brings, he's quite similar in a lot of how he functions. He has a great TMR, an amazing STMR, and a very strong vision card. So overall, a good character that could be worth your investment. Now let's look real quick at Sora. Sora is probably the most anticipated character on this banner because he does provide a ton of damage. He's a very cool character. and he's kind of like a combination of Tifa and Neo Vision Rain. Okay, some of you guys have seen how I've used Neo Vision Rain, where I soup up his LB damage, I shift him into his hero form, and then unleash, you know, these big limit bursts for big damage. Sora does that, but he does it like way better. Like his burst damage with his limit burst is probably like 50% stronger than Hyo's or more. So he can burst very, very hard with his limit burst, and it's very, very cool. Before diving into that, let's talk about his TMR, his STMR, and his vision card. His TMR is good. It's good for him, but it can only be equipped by him. It's a one-handed sword that gives you 50% true double hand or true dual wield. You're never going to want to use this for double hand because it doesn't have damage variance, so strictly use this for true dual wield if you do use it. Really handy if you're a newer player because this will get you started with his damage builds right away. Gives you that 50% true dual wield, and it gives you a good amount of attack as well. And he prefers swords, so for him, like this is a good item. It's not going to be his best in slot item when you're talking about high tier builds because his STMR is kind of insane. It is a materia that gives 80% attack and 75% LB damage. So since he's an LB damage dealer, you're going to be using this on him, and the 80% attack just helps a ton. It's a really, really solid materia, and yeah. Do I think it's the best materia in the game? No. Do I think it's a great materia? Yes. And it's something that Sora will absolutely use on himself. You could use it on other people like Tifa or other future LB damage dealers. Very solid STMR there. His vision card is, in my opinion, just okay. I prefer more specialized cards, okay? That's the bottom line for me. I like stuff that's more specialized. And Sora's vision card is less specialized than other cards that are currently on the market. So he gives you up to 100 flat attack with this vision card, which is a good amount. That's pretty much the standard of being like a best in slot, other than Riku's, which gives a little bit more. But it only gives 60% attack. Other cards give up to 100% attack, and the condition for the final level is Kingdom Hearts only, so it's another 20% attack, so you're getting at most 80% attack with 20% defense, magic, and spirit, and then 10% resistance to a bunch of elements. In my opinion, the defense, magic, and spirit are kind of irrelevant. You're not using those stats much of the time because damage dealers aren't being hit by bosses, and for similar reasons, I don't really care about the element resist. I would rather just go with a better vision card that gives me more attack, and then I can equip a stronger materia on the character that can give me the defensive stats that I want. So overall, I don't think this vision card is as strong as other ones out there. That being said, if you get this one and you want to use Sora, this is absolutely an awesome card for him. 80% attack with 100 flat is still like almost as good. We're talking about a 20% attack difference in terms of specialization, so it's still a very good option for him. Looking at his kit real quick, he does basically the same thing that Tifa does in terms of rotation. He is a light, absolute mirror of equity chainer damage dealer. He can imbue himself with light, he can imperil light, he can buff light damage for himself, and that's all well and good. And then you brave shift into his shifted form, and just like Tifa, he's locked to doing this on a 2-turn rotation, so 2 turns on, 2 turns off. And when he brave shifts, he's able to buff up his LB damage, buff up his attack, buff his light damage, and then he's able to drop the hammer with his limit burst, which is a 150 times modifier light chaining LB. So if you like what you've seen with what I've been doing with Neo Vision Rain, where they're LB chaining, and then I use Tifa's LB to finish on top of it, like you could do that, but like way better. It would be like having an extra Neo Vision Rain chaining an LB in there in terms of damage. It's very strong, very effective. And I think it sounds like a ton of fun to use because he functions just like Tifa, where he can, fill his own LB, he can buff his LB damage, he can be self-sufficient in that regard, and then he can just let it rip, and yeah, everything will die. It's very, very strong. Now, in terms of comparison between him and Tifa in terms of damage, because I think we all know right now that Tifa bursts the hardest in terms of LB damage, I've heard some people throw out there that like, oh, Sora does like twice as much damage as Tifa. And that's not strictly true. Sora and Tifa do comparable amounts of damage when they are at the highest tier of build, but when you're at lower tiers of build, Sora is much easier to build. So let's take a look real quick at some builds that I threw together. Starting with Tifa. I'm not going to go into all the details because you can see the build right here. I have her with a 250% LB buff. I have her with a 300% attack buff, both of which she can give herself. I don't have her built for killer since that's going to swing things a lot for both characters in those unique situations. But I do have an open materia slot on her, and she's built using the Madame Adele suite of stuff, her STMR, her TMR, and her vision card. So this is a top tier Tifa build, and she does an average of 532 million damage, you know, and this is excluding imperils and some of those other things, but this is just a comparative thing. When I take the same metrics and apply them to Sora, say like a high quality STMR build, he's doing another, let's see, he's doing 652 million versus her 532. So you're talking about 100 million more. You're talking about being 20% stronger at the highest tier of build. But what I will say about this is that Sora is so much easier to build than Tifa, because Tifa either needs all of Madame Adele's items, or she needs equip greatsword materia or equip sword materia and to equip LB boosting weapons and things like that. And it's a real pain. She's very difficult to build to high tiers of play. She's just a pain, especially if you're a new player. You're really going to struggle to build Tifa to the degree that you can build Sora. Sora, you can build very easily to high amounts of damage. So if you're at a lower tier of play, you may feel that Sora probably does do twice as much damage as your Tifa could do. But if you are at a high tier of play, like I am, or like other players are, you might find that your Sora is probably cranking out 20 to 25% more than your Tifa is, or maybe even more. You know, if you don't have Madame Adele stuff, Sora will crank out more damage than her. I think one of the strong combos would be to be able to use Sora and Tifa together. I think that would give you the highest amount of burst damage in the game, to be able to chain Sora with another Sora and then finish with Tifa, or finish with Ibarra for that matter. You could do any of that, and that would do just an insane amount of damage, and it would be really cool. But overall, that should give you kind of an idea of where they're at in terms of competitiveness. Now, the question of whether or not they're worth it. We'll start with Kairi. Kairi, I think you should only pull for if you really like her as a character, if you love her sprite, if you love her sprite work, and you just have ideas of how you want to use her, okay? Because there are people out there, God bless them, who still use Medias, or who still use Queen, they're very old units that are beyond their typical shelf life, but you can still find ways to use them. I think the same thing sort of applies to Kairi, where she's going to do some relevant damage now, and she might have some useful support stuff now. In the long term of the game, I don't think she's going to ever see meta peak in terms of use. I don't think she's going to ever be meta for a fight. So that being said, I think Kairi is going to be all on you, whether or not it's a personal choice, a personal preference of would you like to have her on your team. I think Riku and Sora are easier sells in terms of like, is this a good unit to get? I think if you're missing a breaker, or if you're missing a good breaker, or you want like a breaker damage dealer combo plate like Lauren, then Riku's the guy for you. He has a great vision card, he has a great STMR, he has a good TMR. He comes with a lot of stuff that's really good. So among the characters, I think he is one that could be worth your time. I'm personally not pulling for any of the Kingdom Hearts units because I don't need anything that they offer. I can already maximize LB damage builds without their items. I can already maximize any other builds without any of their items. So for me personally, they don't actually contribute to my roster because I already have their roles covered too. That being said, Riku is a very powerful character with some great stuff that he offers, and I think that as the game power creeps with content, because I've alluded to this before, but in the Japanese version of the game, they add gimmicks to trials to kind of power creep units out of relevance. So you'll be able to use Sora in an upcoming trial, but the next trial after that, they'll implement a mechanic that makes it so that Sora can't really do anything against that trial, and then they introduce a banner with a character who has the antidote to that mechanic, right? That's kind of the direction of content design in the Japanese version, and we just basically got all that stuff ported to us. So that being said, with content creeping like that, I think that Riku can still stay relevant because he is a breaker and because he is a chainer. So if you're using a finisher and you just want to use Riku for breaks and then to chain and finish up with a more modern damage dealer on some of those gimmicky or cheesier fights, you're still going to be able to find use to him. And so that's why I think Riku is probably the best character on the banner, the best value, and he's going to stick around the longest. That being said, if you want to pull for Sora, I think Sora is a really good value too, because in the right here and the right now, he's going to do a crazy amount of damage. He's going to be very strong. He's one of the first characters that's actually like better than Tifa quite handily. And I think you'll see a lot of people use him. I think you'll see a lot of use of him. I think my primary concern for Sora is kind of what I alluded to, where the way that content is developed in the Japanese version of the game, it gets very gimmicky, where a new mechanic is introduced that kind of counters the old meta, and that you have to pull new units to kind of counter that meta. And it's really aggravating. It makes it so that every trial feels like a flavor of the month sort of thing. And I think Sora is going to be a great flavor of the month, but if content keeps coming as it has been from the Japanese side, we're going to see Sora be very useful in some trials for the next month or two. But as soon as we get stuff like Chimera Extreme or Asura Extreme or Bahamut Extreme, Sora is not going to be in any of those parties that are clearing under the turn limit, or that are clearing in under even like 30 turns or 50 turns. Like, he's going to be out of the meta very quickly because of the way that content and characters have been designed. So if you're a meta chaser, just keep that in mind. If you care about Dark Visions, I think Sora is a strong option for that too. So, you know, ultimately make your own decision. For me, I'm saving for FF6. I really want Terra. I really want Realm. I really want Archmage Kefka. Who else is on the banner? I really want on the further banners with Locke. I also want Sabin, and I want Edgar. Like, I want all of that stuff instead of this, because I've actually played FF6 mostly, and I've never played Kingdom Hearts. So for me, you know, that's my choice that I'm going to make, but I'm going to encourage you to do your own research and kind of decide for yourself, you know, who is the best value. Honestly, I think they're good characters and that you can enjoy them for a long time. Just be aware that they may not be relevant for a lot of trials, and that's not your fault. That's 100% the design fault. That's something that is going to be unavoidable, and at this point it's going to be one of those things where maybe the best thing to do is to just start ignoring trials if your characters can't beat them under the turn limits or in the ways or time frames that we want them to, because that's just the direction that design is going in. So that's my opinion on the Kingdom Hearts units. You let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I'll see everybody in the next video.